So I saw this video show up on my Facebook feed, and normally I don't respond to TikTok stuff. I know that's popular, but this was shared out, and people seem to think that the points made in this video were really solid, but I tend to disagree. I think there's a lot of dishonesty and disingenuous comparisons being made here in terms of what's happening. This is largely centered around the Target boycott, and this person is responding to a video or a short video clip where apparently a pastor is quote-unquote destroying a pride display, when really all that happens is a woman is picking up some shorts and she drops them and just leaves them there. And there's a caption underneath that's being covered up by this reaction GIF guy. I really don't like TikTok. But there's no context there. You don't get to see if this is actually a pride display or just a display with some rainbow multicolored clothing on it. So there's a lot of questions here that really can't be answered. I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt and say that this is actually what is taking place, is that a pastor is destroying this, and somehow they have this inside knowledge that that's exactly what's going on. It doesn't make it right. You can be morally opposed to something without actually destroying property. I don't believe that people should be going that far. There's only a handful of instances where that would even be remotely justified, and I can't think of any in this instance. But I also want to point out to people that a lot of what you're seeing in regards to people who are boycotting, going into Target and destroying things, it defeats the purpose of a boycott. A boycott is you wouldn't step foot in the store ever again. You declare you're not giving them your money and you just go the other way. So that's not an effective boycott, that's just destroying property because you don't like it. And most Christians, conservatives, libertarians, or anybody of any political spectrum that is opposed to what Target's been doing by marketing this alternative lifestyle stuff to kids, that's not what they're doing. They're not engaging in violence. They're not being degenerate. They're not being mean-spirited even. They're just saying, well, this doesn't align with our morals, so we're going to take our money elsewhere. So let's go ahead and watch, and I'll try to respond to some of his points here.
This pastor destroys Pride merchandise at Target.
And again, based on this, there was no destruction. A pair of shorts was dropped on the ground. That's all that happens.
Okay, I'm not.
And then he goes into speaking. So it's already not being honest about what's going on in that particular clip. So we're already arguing in bad faith here. And I don't particularly appreciate that. But let's just go one by one based on his points and see what he has to say.
I'm not here to defend Target, but
he says he's not here to defend Target, but yet the nature of what he's saying is saying that anybody who is opposed to Target is a hypocrite. So he's inadvertently defending Target by the nature of what he's doing. And I don't think he understands this.
I do want to talk about what is the definition of pushing an agenda.
Well, the dictionary definition of an agenda is, well, I'll actually bring it up right here and read it to you. So the dictionary definition of an agenda is list of things to do, items to cover in a meeting. A list of things to be discussed in a meeting. There's several definitions here. A program of things to be done or considered. A usually unstated or underlying motive. Those are a few dictionary definitions of agenda. So that's all people really need to know about what an agenda itself is. Now, as far as pushing an agenda means making it known what your agenda is and putting it out there to the world. And really pushing it, like really marketing what that agenda is. An agenda isn't a bad thing also. You need to clarify that. An agenda is simply as its different dictionary definition specifies. It can be malicious. It can be underhanded. It can be morally contestable. And a lot of people who claim that Target is pushing an agenda feel like that's what they're doing because they're marketing to a specific group of people, but also trying to include children in that discussion. And a lot of people find that morally reprehensible. They don't feel like children should be part of discussions of alternative lifestyles. For one reason or another, agree or disagree. And I think parents have every right to do this.
Now, I don't drink, right?
But I don't either. Hey, that's something we have in common. I drink non-alcoholic beer. I was in wine and beer customer service all of 2022, and we would do tastings, and I would be the guy who always recommended the non-alcoholic beers to our customers that would drink a lot of that. But I would also recommend alcoholic beers as well. But because of my family history, I've got to just really be careful with alcohol, so I choose not to have it, and when I can, I just have non-alcoholic stuff. So, interesting.
Everywhere I go, in damn near every store, I see liquor, wine, and beer advertisement. Is that pushing an agenda?
Well, in a technical sense, yeah. If people got together and decided that they have a marketing strategy, then that's them implementing their marketing strategy, and that technically could fall under the umbrella of pushing an agenda. It's just not malicious, it's not divisive, or at least generally it's not. In general, it's just we have a product or service that we want to advertise, and we're going to put it out there, and the people who like it will be drawn to it, and the people who don't will just ignore it.
What if you're a meat eater and you enjoy your meat? As soon as you walk into a restaurant, they let you know, like, hey, we got vegetarian options. Is that pushing an agenda?
There's a couple ways that he framed this incorrectly. I'm going to play that again and kind of go through it piece by piece, because there is some.
Hey, we got
there's some framing issues right in the beginning here.
You enjoy your meat.
There's definitely some framing issues here. I really don't like TikTok's interface.
What if you're a meat eater and you enjoy your meat?
Okay, well, me eating meat and liking meat is fine, but I can also like vegetables too. I think what he meant to do was say, maybe you're allergic to vegetables, maybe you don't like vegetables, but yet you're being offered vegetables. Is that pushing an agenda? That's what he should have said, but instead he just said you're a meat eater who likes meat, and you're offered vegetables. Well, there's not going to be any sort of boycott. I'm not going to boycott Olive Garden if they suggest the entrees that are loaded with vegetables and I came there to eat meat. I'm not offended by that in any way, shape, or form. It's not being done maliciously or to subvert my my sense of morality. It's not being done to oppose my sense of morality either, or to impose a sense of morality on me that I personally disagree with. But it is pushing an agenda, technically.
As soon as you walk into a restaurant, they let you know, like, hey, we got vegetarian options. Is that pushing an agenda?
Well, yes, because in most restaurants, when they're going over the menu, they have you go over your entrees, your soup of the days, your whatever, before somebody makes a choice, just to sort of pique your interest. Some restaurants don't do that. Excuse me. Some restaurants don't do that. They just let you order what it is you want, and they just say, are you ready to order? You know, I've been in places that do both. But this isn't really the argument that he thinks it is, because it's not ideologically subversive to offer somebody who likes meat vegetables. Especially the way that he phrased it. If he had phrased it as, I hate vegetables, I'm offended at the very sight of vegetables, or I'm allergic to vegetables, I can't have contact with them, even in those, I don't know too many people who would be offended at being offered vegetables as an option at a restaurant, or would claim that they're pushing an agenda. That's disingenuous to think that people think like that.
What if I'm Catholic or Jewish or something, and I don't celebrate Christmas?
I'm pretty sure both of those religions celebrate Christmas, and people within those religions celebrate Christmas,
But I can bet your bottom dollar, come December, I'm gonna hear Christmas music, see Christmas movies advertised everywhere, Christmas clothes, Christmas parties, discounts, all this stuff, Christmas stores. Is that pushing an agenda?
Well, not to reiterate, but once again, yes, it absolutely is by the dictionary definition of an agenda, because the stores decided that they want to join in the celebration of Christmas with everybody else. It absolutely is pushing an agenda, and there are people who are adverse to that and who say, I want nothing to do with Christmas, I don't like Christmas, I don't like going out on Christmas, I don't like all the festiveness, the celebration, all of that, I don't like any of that, and I choose not to partake in it. But the stores who are partaking in it are absolutely pushing an agenda. It's just, generally speaking, not a subversive or divisive agenda. It's more or less just what is marketable, what people want from them in general. They're trying to appeal to as many people as possible. The amount of people who don't like Christmas are outnumbered by the people who do. So it just makes sense for the store to go with what is the most popular and what most of their employees will celebrate Christmas in some way, shape, or form. It's not divisive. Christmas is not generally a divisive holiday, even though there are those people who are opposed to Christmas. But it's not ideologically subversive or even that controversial. There is some, but not to the level of what is happening with Target.
When my son was like 1 or 2 and I used to shop for him in Target or Walmart or wherever, or even when people would bring him shirts, it would always say little player or hide your daughter or lock up your daughter. I'm coming for her. You know, some real predator shit.
I question if that's what some of those actually said. Some of those seem very explicit for kids' clothes.
You know, so you can start grooming and advertising your son as that little player heartbreaker that you're going to teach your daughter to stay away from.
Well, I mean, if you think that that's morally wrong, you have an obligation to say no, to not buy it, or to return it. If your friends got it, say, hey, thanks, but I don't like the messaging that's on this shirt. No offense to you, but I don't really feel the same way you do about the joke. There's multiple ways you could handle that, and I think they would all be acceptable. So I don't really know what point he's trying to make here. If those shirts were as explicit as he says, yeah, I would have multiple questions for the retailer as to why they're putting that out there, and I would also have questions for my friends if they're getting that for my kids. And I don't even have kids. But I don't quite understand what level of point he's trying to make here. He's not tying it in. Also, if you're an up-and-coming content creator, this is a small nitpick of mine, don't eat on camera. Unless you're being asked to do something like that, don't do that. That's very rude. It's disrespectful of your audience and their time. It really is. You don't want to do things like that, for sure. This guy is, I don't know. He's something.
And I know what y'all gonna say. We just don't want to force homosexuality on the kids.
Well, exactly. I mean, a lot of people feel like their kids are being coerced into learning about this ideology and engaging with this ideology, and they may not want them to engage with that ideology for various reasons. And so they're saying, okay, so we want to keep our kids away from that for various reasons. Maybe it's full of hate and genuine, vitriol, whatever, but I think for most people it's just we disagree with it, and even if we don't want our kids to have to engage with this sort of stuff at such a young age. We think this is more appropriate for them when they're adults. And I can understand that. Absolutely. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And most people aren't doing what that supposed pastor is doing, by the way. When people say they're going to boycott, they don't just go into the store and start destroying things. They just leave. The types of people who are doing that are agitators who want to make the other side look more violent. More of these instances have been exposed as just that. Which is why I have a hard time believing about this pastor situation, especially because the video doesn't prove evidence that that's what actually happened.
I don't think you should force sexuality, period, on the kids.
Oh, I agree with that. That's a good position to hold, and that's what most people's motivation is that a lot of this stuff is inherently sexual by its own nature, whether people want to admit it or not, and they just don't want their kids exposed to that. Plain and simple. It's not a matter of hypocrisy. It's not a matter of one thing is okay and the other is not okay. And even if it is, that's their moral set, and you have to come to grips with the fact that people have different moral sets and values. And they're going to oppose different people's moral sets and values. Doesn't mean they hate the person who engages with them. That's what's lost in our culture today is if somebody says, I'm opposed to the LGBTQ and all of its various lifestyles, they don't say they hate anybody. They just don't agree with the ideals. I know plenty of people who aren't Christians and I'm still friends with them. I'm friends with people who've walked away from Christianity. I'm friends with a guy who went into this lifestyle and came out from Christianity into that lifestyle. And I made it very clear to him, I do not hate you. You know where I stand on the lifestyle you're going into. I'm going to work with you to be friends where we can. We were friends before that, and hopefully we'll be friends long after that. So the issue is not hatred of people, as this guy seems to imply, but it's a moral difference. And that's how it used to be in this country. There used to be a moral separation between the peoples. Ultimately, When you've got a country made up of multiple tribes and groups of people, there's going to be degrees of separation. And what's important is that we don't get people at each other's throats all the time over this sort of thing. And that we're not getting angry at people. And we're not taking incidents like the thing with that apparent pastor and saying, well, that's that side. They're being evil. They're being malicious. That's one instance. And it's not even clear that that's fully what it is. So we got to be really careful here, guys.
And believe it or not, it's possible to teach kids about gay without teaching them about sex.
Well, I agree with that. I agree with that. But what happens if somebody doesn't agree with the lifestyle as a whole? Excuse me. What if somebody doesn't want their kids exposed to that or doesn't want them to be taught about that? Now, you might say, well, this is a part of the world, so they're going to have to learn one way or another. Fair enough. But if people can avoid it, they'll take steps to avoid it. Maybe they don't want them thinking it's good. They'll acknowledge that it exists, but they don't want them to believe that it's morally good, which I think is a lot of people's stance these days.
They know about heterosexuality.
We're not obligated to teach kids about these things. In fact, I would argue most people don't want their kids to know about these things, at least not until they're of an age to where they can come to their own conclusions about it. Because otherwise it just comes across as coercion.
Without having the idea what sex is.
Well, yeah, because it's not explained to them as heterosexuality in most cases. It's explained to them as mommy and daddy really love each other, and that's important. And that's all the kids really ever need to know. But it gets a little bit more dicey when you start getting into different lifestyles and what those lifestyles entail. And if you're going to be honest with your kids, then you kind of have to go in depth, and a lot of people aren't willing to do that because they want to preserve their kids' innocence about the world. You know, there's layers to this. It's not as simple as you're making it out to be.
So it's possible that they can learn about homosexuality without them having to know what sex is. They know a man and a woman can like each other and be together, and they still don't have to know what they do in the fucking bedroom.
Nobody's arguing that, and you really don't need to get angry about that either. Even if that is your assumption, you know? This isn't really the point that many people are trying to argue about. I agree with most of the points that he's trying to make here about what kids can and can't know. That's not the issue. The issue for a lot of people, again, is the morality of what is being put forward and what is being encouraged towards kids. If kids are being encouraged towards believing a certain lifestyle is good or acceptable or is something to be celebrated, when their parents say, well, no, we don't believe that in our house, then there's a conflict. And obviously the parents are going to turn away from that. And they also might think that there is a sexual danger with some of these things. A lot of these displays have more provocative things. Like they have swimsuits that are basically two-piece swimsuits, not bras, but like two-piece swimsuits where a guy can tuck in his genitals so he can feel more like a woman, in case he doesn't want to go ahead and get the surgery and do all that, or maybe he's in the process, whatever the case might be. And some people don't want their kids exposed to that because that's very explicit. And now you can make all sorts of arguments against that, but the fact still stands. That's a moral issue for some people. It has nothing to do with hatred or hypocrisy. It's just a moral standard that people are trying to be consistent with.
It's crazy. We can force religion, beliefs, politics, everything on kids.
Okay. I wouldn't say that these things are being forced on kids. If their parents believe these things, they're not being forced on the kids. They're just passing on their values. I grew up in a Christian home, and I didn't fully believe in Christianity for most of my childhood. I didn't care. I didn't want to go to church. I wanted to stay home and watch cartoons. It didn't mean anything to me, admittedly. It wasn't until I turned 16 that I started seriously thinking about it, because I was in the process of moving and my life changing, and a lot of things were going through my head. And I decided that I do believe this thing, and I want to be a part of this thing. But I went along with it because it was my parents' authority, and it was what they determined was the highest good for me to at least try to understand. So as a kid, I tried to understand it. And eventually I did come to an understanding of it, even if not fully. I really struggled with that. But it wasn't this sort of abusive authority that you're making it out to be. And as far as politics are concerned, I don't know anybody who gets their kids involved in politics. That's not necessary. Kids don't need to be burdened with the knowledge of politics. They really don't. And don't conflate politics with religion either. That's a whole different thing. Religion is largely moral set. Politics are a set of morals, but it's also policy that don't really directly affect kids. And when they do, it's still up to the adults to be involved, not the kids. So I don't understand the point being made here.
As soon as you walk in the store and see some rainbows on a t-shirt.
It's not that simple, my guy. Again, and I hate to reiterate it, but it has nothing to do with just being rainbows on a t-shirt or just the aesthetics of the issue. It's the morality and the promotion of something in a certain position when the position of the person who shops there might be different. Target is saying we want to embrace and celebrate these things. And what other people are saying is, okay, you can do that, but I fundamentally disagree, so I'm no longer going to partake in that because I don't agree with it. If I shop here and give money to you, that's effectively me being forced or coerced into having to give to this thing that I fundamentally disagree with. I don't believe that's right, so I'm going to shop elsewhere. Once you get back to a neutrality and not engaging in the culture war, then I will shop at you again. But as you're saying, we're going to elevate and celebrate these people who I am ideologically opposed to, then we're going to go the other way. They're dividing people by taking lines in a conflict that's been ongoing since at least 2015, 2016. So, people are drawing lines in the sand. And if they did it with Christian stuff, you'd see the same results. You see the same results, or conservative stuff, or Republican stuff, or whatever the case might be. When a company takes an ideological stance, you're going to alienate people. Companies, if you're going to sell something ideological, it should be from a retailer that is upfront about the fact that that's exactly what they are and that's what their money goes to. People don't expect this sort of thing from Target or from Walmart. So when they start doing it, and they did it years ago, at first, people are okay as long as it's not being promoted to kids. If it's just off into its own thing and accessible to adults where kids are going to have a harder time accessing it, that's one thing. But when you bring kids into it, that's a whole nother can of moral worms that's being opened up right there. That's the issue here.
I don't know. Listen, y'all know I was in them classes. I was on the short bus. Don't listen to me.
I mean, you don't need to beat yourself up over it. You're just trying to figure out why people are doing what they're doing. But I think this guy needs to understand that it is largely a moral issue, and it's a complex one. It's not as simple as people just being hateful. But because we're in this hyper politically charged culture war, everybody is going to extremes. And when somebody goes to an extreme and it blows up online like this supposed pastor did, then you got to be extreme about it in your rhetoric. And it's unnecessary because a majority of people are not doing this. That's not their stance. They're not going to even go into Target to do this. It's not right to just destroy property because you're angry about something. That's unreasonable. Even if I agree with the person who is doing it, I'm still going to call it wrong because it is. That's just property destruction. That's not going to change Target's mind. It's ridiculous. But people are very passionate about this because there's multiple layers to this. And as a result of a lot of these ideologies, there are bad things happening to kids. I'm not going to go into specifics for the sake of YouTube, but there are things happening. You really have to look into it. So people do have a right to be upset with this from their own moral standpoint. And you can feel free to disagree with that as much as you want. That's the beauty of America.
I'm just talking shit. I do want to know, though, if the agenda is what supposedly turns kids gay or whatever, and that's the push that they're going for, then how do we have so many people that grew up gay without any push of an agenda?
Well, that's not entirely true, because there are examples of people who grew up in gay homes or with the ideology being pushed onto them. They entered into it, and then they came out of it realizing that they were forced into it against their will, essentially. They were coerced into it. They didn't come to those conclusions on their own. They were manipulated into it by other people, by peer pressure from kids, adults, etc. So don't say that there was never people with a specific agenda to promote this sort of thing and to encourage this sort of thing, because there absolutely was. That's not honest, dude.
If the push in heavy...
It's not that everybody is doing that. I'm sure there are plenty of people who wouldn't dare do that in these ideologies. But it absolutely does happen, and people need to be aware that it does happen. And I would say the people in those ideologies who disagree with that, you need to speak up against people who are doing that.
Media and advertisement really works when it comes to sexuality, then no one should be gay.
This point I actually don't understand. I don't understand what... First of all, he doesn't define what he means by sexuality, whether it's homosexuality, heterosexuality. He doesn't define this at all. And then he goes on to say that nobody should be gay if it's effective. So because he doesn't clarify his point, I don't know what he's talking about. I can't really accurately respond to this. Because if he's talking about heterosexuality, then that's not true. The whole sex sells thing has been around for a long time. But there's always been people who engage in alternative lifestyles of that sort. It's even biblical. It's why the Bible talks about it, and why the Bible specifically goes out of its way to condemn it as sin. God condemns it as sin. He says, I didn't create it. This was something that mankind did, and it is wrong. But he never instructs us to condemn people for it. He just asks us to call people out of that. Plain and simple. But I just don't understand this point, because it needs more clarification. If he's talking about heterosexuality being effective in media, then nobody should be gay. The whole point of heterosexuality in media isn't to encourage heterosexuality. It's there because it's a part of the overarching culture that's normative, that's the majority. The old saying, again, is sex sells, whether you agree with it or not. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with scantily clad women in ads. I never really have, from a Christian perspective. But I've never tried to go out and boycott it or stop it from happening. I just morally disagree. But I don't get the point that he's making here about this, because the whole point of that type of advertisement isn't to keep everybody straight. It's because of the old adage, sex sells. If anything, that's all that is. And if he's talking about homosexuality, then that makes even less sense.
This shit just became acceptable 10 minutes ago.
Okay, well, that's actually not true. If he means 10 years ago, that would be more accurate, because the, I forget what the bill was called. The bill that basically makes gay marriage on a federal level acceptable in 2015. It's been ever since then that this culture has been absolutely being promoted in government, in business. It's gained support from Fortune 500 companies all over the place. In June, everybody changes their flags to rainbows, and it's got overwhelming support for years now, and people have put up with it. But even people who agree with it are getting annoyed by it, because it's just crony corporatism. It's just them trying to cater to a market of people and get their money. When, from a moral standpoint, these people want actual support, but all it is just, we want your money. Oh, and we may give it to a charity that supports this sort of thing, but we'll never disclose if we actually do or not. There's a bit of cynicism to be had there with corporations for sure, but I don't get his point there. And to say that is not... He hasn't been paying attention if he thinks that... and I know he doesn't mean literally 10 minutes ago, but to say that it's recent and that it's recently acceptable, no. It's been acceptable for well over a decade. There's multiple examples of this.
No one. Just saying.
Well, I don't really know what he's just saying, but I do know that whatever point that he was trying to make about hypocrisy doesn't really stand, because at the end of the day, these are people who have a specific set of moral values, opposing another people's set of moral values and vice versa. That's simply what it is. And Target, by virtue of saying we side with these people, we promote these people, are alienating these other people. That's the choice that Target as a retailer has made, and they are reaping the consequences of that. Absolutely. Here on Breitbart, you can see that they're actually losing. Their articles talking about how much money they're losing. If I can find it here, I might have to dig a little bit. But you got Target donates to activist group focusing on injecting LGBT agenda into schools. People have been digging around. Target is very dyed-in-the-wool in support of these causes. And people who oppose those causes are obviously going to have a reaction. Doesn't mean that they should be destroying product, but they're going to have a reaction because it's a culture war. But what I'm trying to find is how much money they're actually losing. I don't know if it's actually on here or not. It includes items for kids and babies. I don't see anything about them losing money. Target partners with Satanist designer for gay pride collection. That's pouring gasoline on the fire right there, because there's a lot of accusations of Satanism within this ideology, and people are pretty much just confirming it at this point. Let me see if I think they've got a picture example of this. Like, Satan respects pronouns. What kind of message are you trying to send there to your opposition? Christians are diametrically opposed to anything demonic, and you're basically saying, well, yeah, we're demonic and we're proud of it. Is that at Target, or is that just something else this designer did? There's a Ouija board wedge thing. That doesn't look good for anybody who's trying to say that this stuff isn't satanic. That doesn't look good at all. Let me just try to find where these companies are losing money so I can finish up my point here. Because Target's lost a significant amount of money because they've chosen, okay, we want to celebrate this thing, we want to encourage this thing, and they have every right as a company to support who they want to support and not support who they want to not support. But they're digging a hole because I think their consumer base is less of the people they want to support and more of the people that they don't want to support. I think that's what's happening. Target boycotts are literally terrorists, says MSNBC guest. Why do people have to be so hyperbolic about this? This is ridiculous. People are just making a moral judgment, and you're free to disagree with that moral judgment. But this isn't doing anybody any favors. Things are going to get so bad. Okay, here we go. Target loses $10 billion in values just 10 days. Report. That's no small amount of money, and this is all self-imposed. This is all self-imposed. Retail giant Target has lost $10 billion in market capitalization in 10 days, largely due to the backlash over prominent LGBTQ plus pride displays, including transgender-friendly clothing items for children. That's just the opening liner there. So in conclusion, it's not about being hypocritical about it. I mean, people who are attacking things, they're not boycotting. If they're destroying property, they're not boycotting. They're just engaging in vandalism at that point. They're not doing an active boycott. So you can't take that and say that's what everybody wishes they could do. Because they don't. They'd rather just not have anything to do with Target. Because it fundamentally is aligning with people who they are ideologically opposed to. That's what happens when you engage in a culture war. So anyway, thank you very much for watching, folks. This has been Super Koopa TV with another edition of Koopa Talks. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. God bless. Have a good one. Peace.